Welcome to the Star Chamber. I'm Ryan Swayze, a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and the founder and president of the Walk the Talk Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates for and advises currently serving and former military service members going through the arduous journey of administrative processes and investigations in our government.
And I am Francescagraham, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Advisor for the Walk the Talk Foundation. For all our returning guests, welcome back. And for our new listeners, thank you for tuning in. Before we begin this week's topic, please do not forget to hit that subscribe button, check out our Walk the Talk Foundation website, and hit that donate button if you think we're doing a good job. Also, check out our newsletter, the DoD Times Redacted, on all the socials, including LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. Links in the description. All right, Star Chamber listeners, let's get started. Welcome back, Star Chamber listeners, to another fantastic episode of the Star Chamber.
All right.
One of the best and most highly listened to podcasts, certainly within the entire United States. And we're still hoping for that like from Joe Rogan or Sean Ryan or one of those guys. Come on, throw us a bone. So we are very, very lucky today. Today we have on our podcast our first sitting member of one of the inspectors general of one of the federal agencies. So on our podcast today, we have Dr. Julie Kroviak. She is the Principal Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Healthcare Inspections within the Department of Veterans Affairs Office of the Inspector General, a position that she has held since June of 2022. Prior to this position, Dr. Kroviak served as the Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Healthcare Inspections. She began her career at the Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General as a senior physician in healthcare inspections. Before joining the OIG, she served as the medical director of the Washington, D.C. Veterans Affairs Medical Center, Fort Belvoir community-based outpatient clinic for 11 years. Dr. Kroviak is board certified in internal medicine. She obtained her undergraduate degree from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and her medical degree from the University of Alabama School of Medicine in Birmingham, Alabama. Roll Tide. She completed her internship and residency in internal medicine at Georgetown University Medical Center. Dr. Kroviak has served as a project leader and medical consultant on many high-profile inspections. In her current position, she oversees the Healthcare Inspections National Reviews, Mental Health Reviews, Hotline Reviews, and Clinical Consults. She resides in Alexandria, Virginia, with her husband and 4 children. And before we get started, we always have to read that disclaimer for all the Poindexters out there. The opinions and views expressed by guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not represent the official policies, positions, or endorsements of the Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General or any other government entity. This discussion is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as reflecting the official stance of any military or governmental organization. Suck it, Poindexters.
Suck it, Poindexters.
We say that every time, Julie. I know that's not very classy.
I saw the shocked looks.
Yeah,
I
know.
It's per script, I promise.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of Poindexters. I also promise about that.
Yeah, there's. I know there's.
So they can all suck it.
Exactly. So, Julie, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we gave the official bio, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
I mean, I don't know what else is to say besides that bio. That's my deal. I studied internal medicine in the DC area. I finished my residency at Georgetown. And what you may not know, when you're a resident, you do these things called continuity clinics. So you go pretend or so to be a real doc and you've got an attending over you, but you're in an outpatient clinic. And I was magically assigned to the VA clinic in DC. Kind of fell in love, even in medical school, with my experiences at the VA. So while I wouldn't have known then that was going to be my path, I was always really attracted to this population and serving this population. So it was kind of, I think, predestined for me to be working with veterans. Certainly in primary care. But I think what I would add is I started in 2003 at the VA as a real doc. And then there was a lot going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. But I might have started as the stereotypical veteran patient. Within a couple of years, I sort of felt like a pediatrician because what was coming back was a lot younger than what I was, typically used to treating and certainly what I trained on. But that's where it all started.
So for all the non-doctors in the group, myself included, what does internal medicine mean?
So it's everything related to adults, except for you don't do surgery and you don't treat children, and you try to avoid pregnant women because they're so high risk unless you're an obstetrician and gynecologist. That said, I'm going to start getting women too at the practice. So then you start worrying about at the VA about, childbearing age and things like that. But for the most part, I was taking care of adults and things not related to childbearing and anything requiring surgery. So a general practitioner per se.
So basically the opposite of external medicine. Sorry, poor Dr.
I hate to say that because I was looking at skin. So, that's pretty external. I don't know where internal, I think it's like organ function. So I was making sure the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the liver, everything was working from afar.
And for those in our audience, you did not see when Julie said it's good, we try to stay away from pregnant women. Ryan just had this smirk that he was trying to hide, but I saw it. We all saw it.
I'm a mother of four. I've been pregnant, Francesca. So I'm not anti-pregnant women. I just can't treat them.
Minute 4, we've already derailed here. Well, Julie, thanks for coming on the show. And first and foremost, thanks for reaching out to us. I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but you read something, whether it be a post or a DoD Times redacted article, show plug, or a Star Chamber episode, that spurred you on to reach out to us. What happened there? What was it that caught your eye about Walk the Talk?
My name. You called me out.
I did. I tagged her. I tried to tag.
Guess it was us then.
Yeah, it was us. I did. I tried.
Then I've been stalking you, so it's okay.
Yep, I tried to tag the head of IG or VA, and I couldn't. So then I kept going down the list until I found someone I could tag, and it was Julie.
Which usually happens, yeah. I usually get
that's the Tuscaloosa article.
Tuscaloosa, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Which got a lot of attention. We published it in September, but I can't remember when you tagged me, but it was related to that article for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I was intrigued.
That explains that mystery. All right. So, Julie, you're a provider for a long time. Tell us about how you transitioned from provider to the world, the dark chasm, which is the Inspector General.
Yeah,
world.
It is the dark side. So, when we were in VA or when I was in VA practicing, it's the dreaded enemy. Either they're coming for trouble, meaning, something happened at your clinic, something happened with a patient you took care of, or they also have these, routine inspections, but those routine inspections are pretty aggressive. They're looking through your trash, they're looking through your cabinets, they're looking to see how clean the place is. So, I never had my eyes on the job until it randomly appeared in my USA Jobs profile. And I was a bit intrigued, the 4 kids working in a clinic that was well beyond capacity, certainly wasn't ready to leave veterans in any way, shape, or form. So I was intrigued by the job and sort of pursued it. And there's really no magic to that transition because I was still very much involved in veterans. I joined this Office of Healthcare Inspections, which is within the VA OIG. I was in the medical records of veterans. I was reviewing cases, trying to substantiate or not substantiate allegations related to quality of care. So it was a pretty natural transition, except for the fact I wasn't touching patients anymore.
Okay. And so what is your lane within the OIG now?
Yeah, so it is everything that has to do with healthcare quality and access to healthcare for veterans.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
And it is massive. And we're the only OIG that has a healthcare. We've got about 200 people with clinical skills. Most of them have taken care of veterans, and we only do oversight over VHA, which is the Veterans Health Administration.
Okay, and so where do like the genesis, let's talk about just generically the genesis of an investigation that you oversee or run. It stems from, I'm guessing, any number of entities, whether it be Congress, a patient, constituent, a group of patients.
Yeah.
How does that play out? Where does it come from? How does it get to you? How does it then run? How is it then reported? Take me through like the kind of
Okay.
lifespan.
So we have a hotline, like a phone number you can call. We have a website for web-based submissions. So staff, like employees, veterans themselves, family members, any taxpayer can submit a concern or allegation that they have related to anything VA. When it comes into this main, including Congress. So when it comes into this main hotline, if it looks, tastes, smells like anything healthcare, it gets trickled to the directorate that I run, which is healthcare inspections. And then we do a pretty aggressive triage of every allegation. So our big hotline gets like 40,000 calls, submissions a year. And about
Wow.
7 or 8 of those will trickle to us to then do an aggressive triage. Is it credible? Has it already been addressed? If complainants can be completely anonymous. So if it's super vague and we can't go back to get more information, it kind of dies in the water. But if they're confidential or leave contact information or all the information is there that we would need to start an inspection, then we jump in and we open
Okay.
a hotline.
And how big is the team? Like in terms of bandwidth, how many people do you have running these 40,000 complaints a year to
Well, keep it
ground?
now. Now we've gone down to 8,000. We're not doing 8,000 products. So we will get, kind of off the wall allegations. We'll get things that 20 years ago, my dad got mistreated at the, Kansas City VA. Those things we don't do. We're looking for things that are relevant, current, and why they might be a single patient case. We're looking for stuff that we could, project across the system. Like, did something happen to a veteran that was a systems failure that leaders across the system would want to read about, do their own risk assessment and say, yeah, okay, we're good here, or no, this could have happened to us. So when we find those types of cases, we'll put together a team of experts, usually 4 or 5, and each team will have a physician assigned to it. So there's almost always a clinical component to everything we do here. So they'll be kind of the doc is sort of the medical expert on the case. But we do upfront research. We put together a work plan. We list out everybody we need to talk to. We establish when we're going on the site visit. We go on the site visit. We collect all the information, whether we're asking them to pull data for us or we're pulling it ourselves. We're interviewing everybody that we need to interview. I mean, some of these hotlines will interview like 50, 60 people to get to the crux of the issue. Sometimes we get away with interviewing, 5 or 10. Then we come back, we draft the work, our findings, and then it goes through some crazy layers of review and internal referencing before we publish.
And I'm sure the variance is huge, but can you offer some kind of rough median in terms of from start to finish, how long these processes go?
Yeah, so it can be anywhere from 6 months is probably the quickest we can get something out. That doesn't mean we're holding information though. So if we're on site and it's like, holy cow, the patients are in danger right now, we will stop and tell the local leadership. If it's big enough, we will call the Undersecretary for Health. So we're not holding these crazy stories until publication, and then patients will be safe after we publish it. So we're getting out the critical information to ensure patient safety, but anywhere from 6 months. If we're doing a national, which is a type of product that looks at things across the system as a whole. So it's not a for-cause review. We want to know how VA is handling, pain management, opioid prescribing, or something like that. That's going to be a big data pool. We will certainly go on site and do interviews, but those projects can take 12 to 18 months to get out.
And
Wow,
when you,
okay.
if I were, so if there's a VA facility, does healthcare inspections, your office, does it, or the office that you lead, does it manage every aspect of that VA facility, the front desk, the emergency room, the
So
pharmacy.
we don't manage anything. We are
or not manage, but
right.
inspect.
So we have
Inspect.
So we have purview over anything VA, and that
Okay.
includes when VA purchases care in the community. So if VA has paid for care, and we get allegations that something's going wrong with this community provider, then we have access to all that information. All the data that VA has, we have access to every database they have, including their medical record, which is for us kind of our gold. That's how we go in to find out what happened or what was documented to have happened. And then, that's an important source of information for our teams.
We talked a little bit flippantly about the black hats of the Inspector General. This is kind of be a little bit of a long-winded question, but it's relevant, I promise. So I came into the IG world circa 2013, and the Air Force had gone through a pretty substantial revision of their philosophy of the IG system, insofar as there was the black hats and the white hats. And when the IG rolled in, you were striving as a unit, as a commander, what have you, to get the best grade possible. And that meant hiding as much as possible to be apparently as in compliance as you could make it or fake it, so to speak. And in 2012, the Air Force says, you know what, this is kind of ridiculous, because the whole intent of the IG system, the spirit, is to make the organization better. It's to identify risks and mitigate those risks. And so it was a huge mindset shift for the Air Force that took, and is still taking place really, because when they see the IG, they tend to quake in their boots a little bit. We talked at the open of the show of the bad guys rolling into town. Talk to me through the IG vis-a-vis inspected/investigated entity, whatever that is, and the relationship there and the potential conflict of you're trying to get to the truth and make things better for the system. The inspectee or investigatee is maybe invested in other things, maybe a little self-centric, and there's tension there. What do you see?
So yeah, there's absolutely tension between oversight and the body you're overseeing. And I think that's actually a good thing. We're not supposed to be buddies. Like it's not supposed to be walking into a facility and hugging people that you may have even worked with before. So many of our staff come from VA that, we have to be really careful to say, we're not partnering with you here. We are doing oversight, and we very much believe the work we do supports your mission. So VHA's mission is to provide high quality care to veterans, families, and caregivers. What we're doing is trying to support that. Maybe respect, but don't be afraid is probably the goal that, we achieve, but it takes time. The other problem we have, which I think we're getting so much better at, is because we hire from the department, there's this idea that, I was a pharmacist. I know where pharmacy can hide stuff. I know where they can kind of get away with things or break the rules and do that stuff. So the inclination is, well, when we go on this inspection of this pharmacy, I know right where to look. And I'm going to look in places where it's not even part of the allegation. And that's a huge no-no. Like that's how we lose credibility. Our staff, we so repeatedly enforce that to be credible, we have to be true to what oversight is. We have a scope of things we're looking at for a project, and that's what we're looking at. However, that doesn't mean when we're on site looking at a pharmacy problem, if staff approach us saying there's serious things going in the OR, there's an incompetent provider, we'll take that information, but it will not be part of that project. It goes back to be funneled through that hotline that I described earlier. In order for us to do what we need to do, we can't be looking for skeletons or looking so out of scope for the project we're focused on. We'll never get anything published because the scope will explode enormously, but we'll lose respect of the people that we need to want to talk to us. We need them to want to reach out to us when there's a concern. We want their feedback for how we conducted our inspection. That matters to build a relationship, but not a partnership.
Yeah, so that's good. And so that's your approach, is kind of this professional distance, but also maintaining your boundaries during an investigation, inspection, what have you. Now, let's talk about the flip side of the coin for a second, if you can speculate. So, you're in a position of leadership within the VA, and you've been notified the IG is coming to look at something you're doing, maybe properly or not. I think from what I saw in the military was there's this sense, kind of maybe this lenient tendency for a commander to again hide it or not be cooperative, because although holistically everybody's trying to make the VA better and the mission better and provide better care, there are individual personalities, egos, etc. at play that sometimes, and sadly too often, kind of take precedent when this tension occurs. What does the VA do? What do you do to try and mitigate that tendency?
So the best we can do is report on a really comprehensive approach to the work we're doing. So we never take testimonial evidence as the fact that prompts the finding that then makes the recommendation. We're looking broadly across. If there's an incident, we're talking to so many people to understand what their perspective was. We're pulling data from EHRs, from patient safety data, from electronic records, from the patient safety data, dashboards. There's such a wide variety of information we're pulling, and we're just reporting the news. But for the work we do, it's pretty hard to hide the truth. I mean, it takes a huge effort. I'm not saying there aren't necessarily efforts to quiet noise or to do what is sort of against the law and coach staff. Like, once you know we're coming, hey, this is our message. Occasionally, do we stumble upon that? Yeah, but we confront it. But I think the way we report and the way we go about collecting information, it's a heavy lift to try to do a cover up. Because people talk. The medical record, goes back years for some of the patients we're looking at their care. The data, the trends in data of healthcare delivery, of access, it goes deep enough and far enough back that, the cover up isn't worth it. And I think the culture that, is at VHA, especially now, is we want to do good. We want to get better. We're vested in this mission. There's just, I would hope there's no room, certainly to lie, certainly to exaggerate. But there's always going to be people dusting the baseboards when we're coming in. And we do surprise visits too. So not everything is like this grand entrance of the inspector general coming into the space. So I think we've covered ourselves in that space. Would people disagree? Yeah. I mean, if we don't substantiate what you came to us with, then you're not going to like us. You're going to think something differently. If we do substantiate it, then, for a little while, you do like us. But that's just the nature of the game.
And one of the things that we talked about prior to the show that I know Ryan and I were both really impressed with is that the VA IG publishes all of your findings, all of the work that you do. You publish that as part of the public record. Yeah. Anybody can go onto the VA website and access that, unless if there's something classified, of course, which is very different than the Department of the Department of Defense or the service IGs, Army, Marine Corps, etc. And so we found that to be very refreshing and kind of along that same line of transparency. Another thing we were talking about that I was curious also if you could speculate on is that I know, as a former active duty, now veteran, when I was retiring, I was utterly shocked that my medical records were not transferred from the Department of Defense to the VA. I somehow had to get everything, which I did, I think, I hope, I don't know, and give all of those to the VA into this new universe of the world. Can you kind of explain why that might be, that while you, as the VA, you can go into every single patient's record and have access to the records, even if they're seen off-post care, but somehow you cannot get one federal agency to transfer those records to another federal agency?
Except when it's the FAA looking to see what disability I filed and make sure that's in line so I can remain a professional pilot. I'm sorry, continue please with the answer.
You digress.
I digress, sorry.
So it is a decades long issue, and there have been multiple attempts to ease that transition of record. I can tell you, I still myself have trauma from remembering patients on their first visit bringing in boxes. Like, I am not exaggerating.
Exactly.
Boxes.
Yep.
And
Boxes. Yep.
it was, what do you want me to do with this? And
Yep.
Can you look these over real quick?
Real quick. On page 2078,
right, do you
you'll
have
find
the clip
why I'm
notes for
sick.
these boxes?
Nope.
And for the most part, and I'll say something that is not meant to belittle the need for those records, but for the most part, I was very comfortable taking the patient's history. But sometimes they would say, I was on 7 different medications, and I can't remember what the last one was, but that one really worked. And so, of course, you're like, well, now I got to go through these boxes to find out what it was. But fast forward to multiple attempts at making the electronic transmission easier or even happen. You have Cerner Oracle now it's just Oracle. But this new electronic record that VA is implementing across the system, there are only 6 sites into it of 171. But that was the biggest impetus, as we understand it, to VA purchasing the Cerner Oracle, because it would be based and worked on DoD's EHR. So then, boom, you would think as we transition each VA facility to this new operating program, the records are there. And it is getting better.
What's the cultural resistance?
The cultural resistance is from prior to DoD VA. I think it was just security reason, a lot of security issues. DoD and VA have very different missions, and appropriately, DoD has different levels of security, and mixing and matching and finding a program that would meet the needs of DoD, the security needs of DoD, and the operating needs of VA was probably the biggest challenge. I'm sure there's so much politics behind it. I was happily just a provider going through boxes and boxes of records with my patients at that time. But it's slow going. And I'm not sure we've even hit on the real issue now for veterans. So yes, that transition period with your records getting brought over, but now so much care is in the community. What VA docs want now is, how do I communicate with community docs? How do I know what just happened when I sent you out for that mental health appointment in the community and I'm not getting records back? So communication with DoD, communication with the community is still a wicked problem with an electronic model, but they are working at it. I say optimistically, it's getting better. It's just a slow roll.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So another question I had is, as you look at your time so far in the OIG, you have your mission, how would you characterize the link between the work that you and your team do and objective improved outcomes for veterans?
Yeah, so we're obsessed with that. Like, how do we measure how good we are at doing what we do and what we want to do? So each report comes out with recommendations. We monitor and follow the action. So VA then responds to those recommendations with an action plan. We oversee the credibility of that action plan. Does it make sense before we approve it? And then we monitor improvements. So they have to submit data to us saying, yes, we put this new action plan in place to improve recommendation 6 from this report. Every quarter, we're giving you data now, not so you only see we implemented it, but that you see it's working. And we have to prove that to you, where it's pretty difficult to close a recommendation from our standpoint. We're pretty aggressive in making sure that the problem is acknowledged, the plan's realistic, and whatever plan is in place is working.
So are they compelled then to follow your recommendations?
Yes. This gets interesting because I think I know where it's
IG with teeth. I like it.
Well, hold
Yeah,
on,
exactly.
because you
What?
used that teeth remark before, and we don't have authority to fire anybody in VA,
Mhm.
but we call out the issues. We demand or require an action plan to address the finding that prompted the recommendation, and we tell them when, yeah, you've got it, this will work, and this is working, we're closing it. They have to respond to our recommendations. Now, it may take a little bit of time, but when it's, over a month or so and we're not getting back this draft with their recommendations, we're getting antsy, and they want to close these recommendations because we have to report in our semi-annual report to Congress what recommendations remain open, and that's a blemish.
So, Julie, you talked about quality control in terms of IG vis-a-vis the VA. One of the discussions we had recently when we were speaking to the Air Force Inspectors General was measures of performance, measures of success for the IG itself. So, for instance, we go, all right, here's what is not functioning well in the Department of Defense Inspector General system. And the DoD IG says, we are awesome. "Quote unquote," thousands are enjoying the whistleblower protections that we afford. Quote, that's a verbatim quote. And our question back was, how do you arrive at that assessment? It's fine to say you're awesome, we're awesome, but by what metric or measure of performance do you assess that? So, question to you: how do you ensure self-improvement and quality reports, quality investigations on a consistent basis?
Yeah, so healthcare is a little bit tricky because what my colleagues can do in criminal investigations and audit is put a dollar sign or a number of arrests. So they have a much easier time at saying, here's what we accomplished this year, and here's what those savings were. Here's what those arrests were. We got bad guys doing bad things to veterans, and easy to measure. We joke, but don't joke around here. Like, what's the value of a life? If we just overhauled the patient safety system, reporting system at a facility, I can't tell you like that saved $4 billion, but I can tell you we reduced so much risk, not only in that VA, but because these reports go across the system, we reduced risk across the largest integrated healthcare system in the United States. I mean, how do you put a price tag on it? I don't know, but I think it sells itself. And we have many examples of where we've done just that. We took the allegation, we saw the component of the system that allowed those things to happen. There wasn't intent, there weren't lazy or stupid providers. It's just in a massive system, things can go wrong with just one little misstep or a misunderstanding of a directive. But when we capture that and we report on it, and VA finds a solution to where it can't happen again, and then we monitor their progress on the implementation and success of that, that's gold. That's a success. Ultimately, for the IG, we're a bunch of clinical docs and nurses in here. We're thrilled for the veteran. Like, that's a win for the patients we used to take care of and for people we're so dedicated to. And cliche, wishy-washy, sappy, whatever you want to say, like, that's what we do and why we do it.
And how is the investigation process, inspection process itself, are there quality control, quality assurance, quality assessment measures for those? So an objective second set of eyes monitoring
it's the bane of my existence, but it's exactly what we need to do to be credible.
I agree.
Our review process is exhaustive. Like, we record every interview. Every sentence has attribution that an independent team called internal review goes through all of our work papers. So everything we put into that draft has to be validated by this team that had nothing to do with the inspection. They don't even know what it's about until they open up the draft, and then they align it with all the work papers. They have to listen to interviews a lot. We get feedback back and forth because they're not clinical. So they might say, well, this is not what the pulmonologist said when they were managing this patient. I listened to the interview, but maybe they don't understand the clinical jargon. We simplified it for the layperson. So we have to then go back and forth and document why we said it this way. I mean, it's exhaustive. And that's even before it gets to the legal review. I mean, months and months of what that publication time I told you about is spent in these quality assurance processes.
Okay. But I mean, you would argue that's time well spent, right? It
Oh,
results in a
absolutely. It's our
quality
credibility.
product. Yeah.
It's our credibility. People make honest mistakes, and you really want to avoid bias. It's really hard, even now as a physician. And I've been in oversight for 11 years. I think I know what the doc's saying. We speak the same language, but I could easily use my own bias to summarize what that is, and that could lose intent of what he or she was saying. So yes, it is so important. So I say the loving vein of my existence. It keeps us in that credible space. Has to be done, but wow, does it take time.
So for your putting on one of your other hats where you have to report to Congress, and I'm sure you work with Congress quite a bit to improve the oversight of the VA itself. Unlike the former DoD IG, Mr. Honorable Storch, who said he didn't, what did he say, Ryan? He does not do anything unless Congress tells him to.
Yeah, that is correct. Yes.
Wow.
That is exactly what he said. Yeah.
Not in accordance with the law, but hey, what the heck? Pew pew.
Well, right. When we were like, "Hey, Mr. Storch, how can we work together to improve some of these laws?" Oh, I don't do anything. I just wait for Congress to tell me.
Whoa, Missy, slow your roll.
I was like, I thought.
Look at how I have no comment. I have no comment.
Yeah, exactly. So along those, yeah, we do. Along those lines, sort of. What would you say is from the work that you've done, the work that your team has done, what's a policy change or a policy proposal that you're most proud of for the VA for veteran care?
Oh, now we don't make policy for the VA.
Of course,
so
absolutely not.
So what
Nope,
have
100%.
we influenced?
Yep.
Gosh, I have so many of those types of love stories, but I love what we've done with the Veterans Crisis Line. If you go back many years ago, 6 or 7 now, it might have even been more, there were so many issues with management and training of staff. I think our work spelled out some real glaring organizational problems to where the clinical side was not aligned or overseeing the activities of responders. So responders, when a veteran calls in crisis, they're not clinical staff, but you really want that clinical expertise to be aligned with their training and oversight and quality assurance processes. So we did a major overhaul in that space by just calling it out, identifying the deficiencies. And it really gave VA an opportunity to reconsider how they structured the entire Veterans Crisis Line. Now, we'll go on years later to have more drama with the Veterans Crisis Line, and we report on that too. And one of our more recent work really called out their lack of true quality assurance processes and lack of adherence to it. It was, again, not our policies that we were creating. We just identified some serious shortcomings and gaps that influenced how a responder responded to a veteran in crisis. So I think looking at over the few years or several reports over the last 6-7 years at the Veterans Crisis Line, that's a success story to our work. And I think it really has called attention to the details as well as, the big organizational approach to managing veterans in crisis.
Perfect segue to what I think my last question, not a guarantee, my last question is going to be, and that's something of a crisis nature. It's very much in the forefront, both on the Department of Defense side as well as Veterans Affairs, is mental health and especially suicide prevention. I'm going to toss something out here, Julie, and you give me your thoughts as a provider as well as a member of the OIG, and you let me know what you think. And there's a famous Desmond Tutu quote, and it's, there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. from what we see, Francesca and I, in our work on the Department of Defense side, and how that has an emotional, psychological impact play, and of course, us having served 22 plus years each, and et cetera. I submit to you that the VA and sometimes gets a bad rap because when a veteran befalls a fate of a suicide, for instance, the attention goes to the VA. What could have been done better? Could there be more? We need to funnel more resources, more money, more providers. There's so little attention on both sides in both departments, I feel, about where it started. That path to suicide, I surmise, goes back years, if not decades. And from what we know, Walk the Talk, what we work with in the administrative kangaroo courts of the Department of Defense, it's like a veritable Chinese water torture when somebody's going through these investigations, to the tune of the recent DoD suicide prevention report says 29% of suicides, active duty and Guard and Reserve, I believe as well, were members involved in an administrative or legal process. But when they die of suicide, the attention goes anywhere but that, anywhere but why did they begin on that path, and what can we do to eradicate and mitigate that risk years prior. So that's just a null hypothesis statement. Welcome any and all your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for days on this topic. And as you can imagine, we do so much. We have our own mental health unit here. So psychiatrists, psychologists, our obsession with suicide is incredibly disturbing, but absolutely necessary. So yes, I talk and think about this idea all the time. VA is responsible for meeting the mental health care needs of veterans. But you're right. You can't just start with the presentation of suicidal ideation or failed suicide attempt. You have to go back and understand the crux of the issue. And I guarantee you, for each individual, it's their own story. Everything is so complicated when you walk through this. You're hitting on so many things that I want to talk about, but I talk about it with my colleagues here. If I put 10 18-year-olds on the door at the door of Harvard, and I said, you have 4 years, Harvard, to make them, quantum physicists. And then Harvard says, but they can't read. And then we say, nope, doesn't matter. Just do what you're going to do. You have to get them through an aggressive 4-year degree, but you can't, and it doesn't matter that they can't read because now they're yours. They're on your steps. They're absolutely yours. So wouldn't you want to pause and say, well, what happened with their schooling for the last 18 years? Why can't they read? Like, what are the gaps there? And to me, not identical, but very similar. What happened in service? Like, you didn't become suicidal or clinically depressed or initiate substance abuse because you registered for care at the VA. There's a long story back there. I think there's so much we could understand about mental health care provision during active duty that would be so relevant to managing the veteran who experienced or didn't experience mental health care, but should have. And the same thing when you're in service. What happened in your family years, elementary school, high school, family history? What was relevant so that DoD can be ready to address that and support that when you're in DoD. And it becomes part of the suitcase that you bring with you through transition to the VA. Like, what is wrong with this comprehensive look at the individual that doesn't start when they register for care at the VA? It is a huge gap. Transition from DoD to VA, nothing makes me more nervous. Like, it is the most, and I didn't even do it. I'm so panicked because I know it's so incredibly high risk. But we are missing so much information about what happened behind that wall. And we need to know what is happening or not happening behind that wall, because clearly it needs to be enhanced or changed or torn down and rebuilt, because this is not getting better. It is much bigger than a single statistic of 17 veterans dying by suicide. And it is that is VA's responsibility, but they are part of a team that is responsible. That is just a number. And that doesn't even tell me VA is failing. VA is hitting so many risk factors for suicide. I do very much believe that number would be even higher if VA didn't exist and didn't address the needs. But again, like, we've got to talk about the baggage, not just new veteran here for appointment fix. And if you don't,
Agreed.
We're going to take you up to the hill and tell you that you shouldn't even exist.
Agreed. Great thoughts.
Ooh, that felt good.
Could not agree.
That's cathartic.
I
Who knew?
I was good. So somewhat along those lines, I was loving every single second of that, Julie. But somewhat along those lines. So once you get that veteran, my last question, once you get that veteran and they have all this baggage and there's as a veteran, unfortunately, I can attest to there's a certain amount of cynicism about the VA and does it actually help? And there's, it's another kind of bureaucratic black box that you're going into, right? So for that veteran, now they're receiving VA care if they've signed up for it, and something is going wrong. And they're scared, they feel like history's repeating itself, they're getting the same potentially horrible care that they got in the DoD, or they're feeling that way at a minimum. And they file one of the 8,000, now I think you said, complaints to your office. How should that veteran file that complaint so that they're not immediately thrown into the stack of like, you know what, I want to help you. I'm sure there's an issue, but I just am completely incapable of helping you right now.
Right. So the absolute best thing is to submit the allegation, but that's one step. I mean, we're talking about somebody who probably needs some immediate care and attention. So within a VA, working with your provider, going to the patient advocate, if you're really concerned about the safety and quality of your care and you're not getting, a response in that, banging on the director's door, advocating for yourself, but also submitting that claim or that allegation through us. I have to be really upfront, and this, but IGs are not advocates or the VA, OIG, we're not veterans advocates. The reality is some of the allegations and complaints, the veteran's wrong. They misunderstood. They're angry. Or the staff member that put that complaint in, they're disgruntled about something else and what they're saying is not accurate. So our job is just to spell out the truth, which when you do that, people are always happy with how that lands. But if you're talking about an immediate healthcare issue, then I can't, especially as a provider, I can't help but say, bang down every door you need to get an answer, maybe even to get a better understanding. Your care might be spot on. You just clearly aren't getting that message of clarity or understanding, or you're not feeling that you're part of the collaborative experience of healthcare. You can't rest until you know that what you're pursuing and the care you're getting is right for you. That's anywhere.
It is. And so one of the things that we noticed in the work that we do with the people that we advise, the service members that we advise, is that they'll file a complaint and it'll be at maybe 7-page complaint, 300 pages of addendums. At no point do they cite any laws, policies, or regulations that were violated. When someone and so we help them with that. We help them to narrow down their evidence. We help them to actually say, okay, this is 10 U.S.C. 1034 or Article 93 or whatever it is, to help the investigator narrow down what the actual issue is. Would you recommend something similar to that for when someone files?
The more
3 years
comprehensive and complete you can be. I mean, it is true. We get allegations that a bad nurse, the surgical ward, is hurting patients. And like, what does that mean? We need patient identifiers. We need some description of events, dates. The more specific you are to the issues you're describing, the quicker we can get in and say yay or nay, or hey, we have follow-up questions. I respect everyone to be anonymous. That is an absolute right. It's important to our mission, important to the work we do. But if there's any opportunity to be confidential and allow us to communicate back and forth to get clarity or request more information, fantastic. Like that's the ideal to where we could go back and forth. Because I agree, it's impossible for everyone to know exactly what we need. Mm-hmm. But if we could have a little back and forth as we review the work with a name and email, something, it is very helpful.
Love it.
No, that is very helpful information. And Julie, we really appreciate you coming on to the show. And I especially liked your behind the wall, we have to tear it down and rebuild. I was just like, that's so good. Behind the wall, the DoD wall, right?
And I'm VA side, so I'm not criticizing anything.
I know you're not.
Out as I see it.
We love that. That was wonderful. I was sitting here dumbstruck and awestruck. It was glorious. So thank you again so much. We really appreciate you coming on to the show. And did you have any final words?
Thank you both for your service. If I didn't say that before I left, I'd be remiss. It's why I'm here, and I'm super excited, and I so appreciate the work you're doing as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Well, I'm gonna close this out here with a few thoughts. First of all, thanks for reaching out to us. Which really equates to Francesca tagging you on an article. So
you're welcome.
Serendipity. We'll just chalk it up to. But this message is for you, as much you, Julie, as it is for our friends at the Department of Defense, Inspector General, now deposed Mr. Storch, the empty office, which was Mr. Storch's office. The IG Act of 1978 does allow for the IG to advocate for change. That's not only the law, it's just common sense. But here are some of the themes that have come across during this chat, which I think the DoD could take notes on. First of all, transparency. And so all your reports are published. When a complainant goes through the process within the Defense Department, they receive a 2-sentence email saying you're closed out. Boop. And if you want to know more, you can go through FOIA, and 2 or 3 years later, you'll get a report which is heavily, and in most cases, overly redacted. So transparency. Number 2, teeth. The VA is beholden to your findings. In the Defense Department, that is not the case. Through the services, findings within an IG investigation are basically suggestions. It's, okay, well, you were the victim of reprisal. And then off to the ether of command it goes. You could take that to a Board of Correction and Military Records, which is another opaque and glacial process that goes years and offers you no real restitution. Again, that's a shortcoming of the Defense Department system, I argue. Talk about measures of performance, measures of success, and really, especially, and this is the thing we're hammering as well, is quality of investigations and qualified investigators. Currently in the Defense Department, you go from tank driver, submarine driver, whatever I guess you drive a submarine, I don't care, to Inspector General in 4 business days. That's ludicrous. And your assignees or augmentees get 0 days of training. They get a PowerPoint deck and go, all right, well, now you've got this investigation, which could have significant ramifications on a person's life, overseen by an amateur. I was one, that's not disparaging our fellow IGs, but I've seen it. It continues to happen. And the result of that, married with the fact that there's no quality assurance, no quality control on investigations, results in amateur investigations that are wrought with investigative shortcomings. Just wrought. It would water the eyes if you read them. So I'm speaking on behalf of the VA OIG to the Department of Defense here, which is completely out of my lane. I see Amanda like, whoa, stop, knock it off. Say, tighten up your act, DOD, because it's within the realm of possible, and you have a model by which you can use. So thank you, Julie, for coming on. Appreciate the time. And yeah, that's all I've got.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it for this week's topic. We really appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and check out our foundation website at walkthetalkfoundation.org.
And feel free to reach out and give us feedback. You can get a hold of us via Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and our foundation's website. Details in the description section. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next episode.